Hello everyone and welcome to the program Business Point on Global Television. I am Samuel Odi. Many thanks for joining on today's edition of the program. We saw the trajectory of the Nigerian O-Share Index as at last week, which shows a massive improvement in the sector, and then we witnessed a significant spike in all of those sectors. We saw the Naira gaining 125 Naira in the previous trading section, and also the Nigerian stock market also hitting and breaking up a spike of hitting 105,000 points rather in the same week. So this same this same week we came into the market with that same momentum on a bullish trend. So we are expecting to see that the Nigerian stock exchange market is going to break out and then break into spike and probably hit up to 110 points before the close of business this week. That has been the projection that we are expecting to see. Also looking at the Naira and dollar, we are expected to see a significant increase given the fact that policies are being in place by the Central Bank of Nigeria, and also the unction about the Treasury bill that was released just last week. So we've seen the numbers, and then the Monetary Board will be having a meeting, I think, later today or first thing tomorrow morning to come to a final consensus on what the final 364-day auction Treasury bill points will be stopping at. Yes, so looking at all of those trajectory now, we are going to have a conversation on it, but where we'll be focusing more on today's program is going to be on the withholding tax. I know you all know that the tax reform bill has passed its second reading in the Senate House, and this withholding tax, deduction of tax, that's what withholding tax actually means at source, is something that is also something that individuals, Nigerians are talking about, and then businesses are also having conversation around those lights that it might affect businesses. So there are two sides of the coin always, where we'll be looking at benefits and also the negative aspects. So we'll be looking at all of those angles on today's edition of Business Point. I won't be doing that alone. I have a guest who will be joining us virtually who would help us understand all of this. But before we go on the brink, let me bring you up to speed where the whole withholding tax was brought up by the Federal Ministry of Finance at release this deduction tax at source regulation from the year 2024, which appeal all existing regulations regarding deduction at source or withholding tax will take effect from January this year. So we want to see how far, since it got implemented from January this year, so we want to see how far it's been going. But while there are no significant change from the existing regulations, telephone charges, internet data, and airline ticket has been added to the exemption list of withholding tax. So the regulation also specified that the format in the second schedule of the Act is approved, and the approved template for remittance and return of amount deducted at source. Although the regulation take effect on January the 1st, 2025, there is a provision for early application from July the 1st, 2024 in certain circumstances. So some persons have actually started benefiting or being charged this deduction tax from July 1st. So now it was not implemented and then introduced to Nigerians in October, now gets implemented on the 1st of January 2025. So looking at all of this now, some persons have reacted negatively, though people are still reacting generally to the entire reform bill, that's the tax reform bill. But we are going to be measuring on this one so as Nigerians would understand what this withholding tax or deduction at source is all about. Just stay with us, we'll be right back shortly after this break. Many thanks for staying with us. Now we are right about to get into the conversation, and I'll introduce my guest at this point. Good morning, Mr. John Ochai. Mr. John Ochai is a financial analyst who majors majorly in financial sectors here in Nigeria. Good morning, Mr. John. Thank you for joining, and I would say Happy New Year to you again. Thank you for joining on to this edition of the program.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure being here.
Yeah, so we saw this bill being introduced, though people are still reacting negatively to it. That's the entire tax reform bill. So now let's talk about deduction at source tax, that's withholding tax. Can you make Nigerians understand what this actually is? Because a whole lot of Nigerians have reacted negatively to it. So what is the basis at which this withholding tax is being charged?
Once more, good morning, Nigerian. Withholding tax is not a new tax under the tax law in Nigeria. But the reason why a lot of people are complaining is as a result of inclusion of the new sector that have just been included into the tax law. And just based on the question, the withholding tax refer to the money that an employee deduct from an employer deduct from an employee, gross wages, and pay directly to the government. The amount we had is credited against the income tax that the employee must pay during the year. So the vast majorities of the people who are employed in Nigeria today are subjected to tax withholding. Non-residents are alien to the subject of tax withholding. And as far as you are a staff or an employee receiving salary, it is the duties of an employer, which is the government, to deduct on behalf of the government. So these are the basic reasons why these things are being done. And then it is done directly so that it will reduce the stress on the employee. So that is why government have directed all the employer to deduct this taxable deduction on behalf of them so that they can credit them directly. It will make the employee avoid tax evasion. And that is why there are so many inclusion right now.
Okay. Looking at this now, thank you for that foundation that you just laid. Now we can build on and then know. So what mechanism can be used now for all of this withholding tax to be calculated? Because Nigerians would want to know what mechanism is used so as some employers wouldn't play smart to, with their employees.
It depends on the sector, because there are 10% tax deductions percent. There are 5%. It depends on the sector, just as rightly said. And then it's hovering around the hierarchy in the system. The lower downtrodden in an organization pay lesser, and the higher downtrodden also, and the upper trodden also pay higher. And then some sector pay higher than other sector, depending on the which of the modality. But the percentage is 10 and 5%, depending on the sector at which the deduction has been made. So, in other words, it's not a new thing. When you go under the tax law, withholding tax calculator modality are also enshrined in that constitution, in that tax law rather. So these are the major things that Nigeria needs to inquire. But the reason why we see it as an alien, it is as a result of us not really reading to know what it is.
Forward and see how it's going to benefit the economy at large, because like you rightly mentioned, it's going to be charged based on those and then based on what people earn, basically, just like what the chairman of the President Committee on Tax Reform is made mention of the fact that the tax reform bill that is coming in is going to make those that earn more pay more tax than those that earn lesser. So moving away from those angles now, how well can this withholding tax or deduction of tax at source benefit Nigerian economy in terms of looking at development now?
Okay, basically, Nigerians is depending on the tax to, cushions the economic issues that we are experiencing in Nigeria. And there is no nation that will survive without tax, because government imposed tax to ensure it solve her problem. And Nigeria is not different from other close-by or other nations. So withholding tax is a way of helping the government to generate revenue to ensure that, yes, they look at the gray area and look at other area where they can channel those revenue being generated to ensure that it's taken care of. So we are only concentrating on the withholding tax. We have so many government agency and then parastatals that are under the tax net, and we have other private sector that are also under the tax net. And when those deductible withholding tax are deducted, they channel them in 21 days to the federal government. And federal government will also repatriate that money to the coffer. And from the coffer, they will use it, and one of the appropriation bill that have been passed to ensure that, yes, that money is appropriated alongside the budgets of the nation. And then with that, we're able to solve our problem.
Where the government made mention of where the 21 states will be able to generate around 2.5 trillion from VAT. So is there any relationship between the withholding tax and valued added tax?
There is no relationship between withholding tax and the value added tax. Withholding tax is money generated from an employee by the employer, while the value added tax are money the tax imposed on goods. And these are two different tax, but they are all tax saddled by the responsibility of those people who are meant to pay. For instance, now, if you go to superstore, there are some goods being imposed on VAT, and when those goods are being purchased, definitely those VAT have to be deducted, and then the VAT has to be paid to the federal government. So there are other ways of generating revenue for the federal government, but there are two different tax models entirely.
Okay, let's move away from the tax. Let's talk a bit about Treasury bill. I know you. We looked at the projection from the Central Bank of Nigeria, and obviously the auction is something that they are still looking into. I'm talking about the final percentage of which the 364-day mark is going to take. So can you throw more light on those aspects now? Because the monetary team will be having, I think, their meeting today, later today or early hours of tomorrow morning, to be able to come to a final consensus. Some are saying 22.5, some are saying 23.5% for the 364-day mark. How key can this be, and then how interesting is it going to be to have more investors come into and also get to venture into this auction of Treasury bill?
Because of the lingering financial issues that we have in Nigeria, Treasury bill is the short-time loan raised by the federal government and is guaranteed by the federal government. And the essence of the Treasury bill is raised to solve the contingencies issues. And then because there are inventories of the federal government that federal government need to meet within the short time. So we wouldn't know the outcome of the MPC meetings today, but the outcome determine the next levels of operations with those who have the license to raise the treasury bills on the behalf of the federal government. So we are waiting for the outcome, and let us also understand the organism of operations on how the model in which they are going to dish out from that meeting. But investors are looking at the potential, and they will tap into the potential. And that is exactly what the federal government is trying to do, to make the financial environment healthy so that they will be able to, compare foreign direct investment to even come into Nigeria. And those who have some resources whom are dormant, they look at a gray area where they can also invest their resources too. And that is why the federal government is trying to make the financial environment healthy, where they can also impart meaningfully into the system, where the trust can be gained by the populace.
Talking about trust now, do you think the inflationary measures of Nigeria is going to contribute negatively to this current treasury bill auction that is about to happen, that is ongoing?
The treasury bills and the inflations are far different apart in an economy. Okay. Inflation is just
well, we're looking at all those angles now, talking on treasury bill, talking also inflation. So now the meeting is actually going to be held, I think, later today around 4 p.m. or early hours of tomorrow morning, and then we'll be having more, insight on what actually would be the final interest rate, and then where the stop profits would be at with the treasury bill. But looking at the withholding tax, so there are a few things that have been exempted. The monetary committee also, monetary team would also be having a meeting on those sectors, basically on the treasury bill, Eurobond, and then also international investments, looking at all those angles now. Like you had mentioned, we need to see a very, very healthy and a friendly environment to be able to attract foreign investments. Looking at those angles now, during the auction a few months ago, we witnessed a bit of an increase, and then the increase was actually slightly than what we saw from the same period as at last year. So with all of this going on, basically, we will be expecting that the monetary team will put everything together to be able to have more friendly avenue. Looking at those angles, I'm talking about avenues. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu made mention of the inflationary measures dropping to 15%. He's going to cut it down to 15%. So if all of this does happen, and then looking at what's happening currently in the financial sector and the Nigerian Stock Exchange, then there might be chance, and then if the naira gets stabilized, that means there's a high chance that those inflationary measures will be cut down to up to 15%. But we've seen different analysts and argue differently, and then say that with the current economic situation and the current cost of items, that is very rare for Nigerians to be able, or the federal government of Nigeria to be able to achieve that which it has projected for the year 2025. And thank you so much, Mr. John Ochai, for taking out time to join us on today's edition of Business Points. We really and sincerely appreciate all of your input, and that's how much time will permit us to take on today's edition of the program. My name is Samuel Odi. I'll see you again tomorrow as we talk more business. Bye for now.